for me. Didn't know how the Viet Cong felt about it, but that was how I felt. So it's kind of interesting. You want to remain close, but you can't let those emotions interfere with you because you have a job to do. And in Vietnam, that really surfaced. I couldn't be thinking about my wife when I needed to be pay attention and watch every single tree or every single person that could have a weapon, that was going to kill us. So it was interesting. You had to do both.
So what did you do with your spare time when you weren't on the front line and dealing with all that kind of stuff? What did you do to distract yourself?
In Vietnam, we didn't have a lot of spare time. Our terminology was we would hump the boonies. That means you walk. And we would march. We wouldn't march. We would go 10 Ks, 10,000 kilometers, and then take a break. That's a lot. That's 10,000 meters. That's a lot. And what is it, 1,500 meters in a mile? But I weighed about 100, and I bulked up because I wanted to be big when I went in the Army. But I came out of wrestling. So I was a wrestler in high school and college, so I bulked up to like 140, 42. That's pretty small. But my rucksack weighed 120 pounds. So, I lost track. What was your question?
Oh, what
Your
you
spare
did in
time.
your spare time. Yeah.
So, we didn't really have spare time. You're out there humping the boonies. You're out there doing your job, which means you search and you destroy. And you find supposedly the enemy, and then you destroy them. And what little time we had, because we did get to come to the rear. We're out in the boonies. We're out doing our jobs, but every now and again we would get to come in for a day or two, never for very long, and then we'd get to refresh. Then we'd get to get a shower, kind of a real shower, or we'd get a haircut and a shave. That was a luxury, and because in the boonies, you don't waste any water. You carry as much ammunition as you can and as much water as you can, and just a little bit of food, because you need the ammunition. You need a lot of it, and you need water to survive, and just a little bit of food. You learn to get by without it. So when we came to the rear, which was only for a few days at a time, we would do. It wasn't a lot to do. I entered a lot of boxing contests. They were called smokers, and they weren't sanctioned at all. They were just guys that got together, and the battalion would say, "Okay, let's pit this guy against that one," and had done a lot of fighting, so I ended up fighting guys. Like I said, it wasn't sanctioned. I weighed 140 pounds, but I'd fight a guy who weighed 180, 200 pounds, because that's the way it was. So, but it was a way to let off steam, and it was a way to not think of going back out, because we're going to go back the next day, or 2 days, or whatever. But we were going back out there. And then again, you always know somebody's not coming back. And that's exactly what happened. My first day in the field, 8 guys were killed and 14 were wounded. My very first day. And that makes an impression on you. But spare time, you get a shave. It was nice. You sit there and the guy shaves you, feels pretty good, as opposed to being out there doing what you're doing.
What was your mindset when you were out there and in battle and fighting?
That was pretty easy. I learned to never, ever relax. Never. And I learned to, when we'd set up at night, we'd set up in 3-man foxholes. They weren't really foxholes, but sometimes they were. Sometimes we'd dig in, sometimes we wouldn't. But everybody wanted to sleep with me because I learned to not go to sleep and still get rest. And I learned to, I guess it would be the REM stage, what you learn about. And I learned to let it only go to a certain point, because I wasn't about to go to sleep. Because Charlie, the Viet Cong, was out there. They didn't want us there. And so I learned to do that. And so we'd set up in 3-man positions. And 2 guys would say, I'm with Herrera, I'm with Herrera. You know, and they'd fight, come stay with me. Because no matter how much I went to sleep, they knew I wasn't asleep. So the mindset was, that's what it was. I learned to never, ever relax. A couple of years ago, I was in Woodland at a gas station, and I had a Screaming Eagle 101st logo on my vehicle. And this young Mexican guy saw it and came up and talked to me. He says, I'm going to Iraq. And he says, do you have any advice for me? And that's exactly what I told him. I said, there are a couple of things you need to do. One is never relax. I said, how old are you? He was like 19 or something. I said, you are young enough. You can sleep when you come back. Don't relax when you're there. You just assume that everybody is out to get you. You have to. You have to think that way. And you have to assume they want to kill you. And you have to think that way. And then I said, but don't do anything to disgrace you, yourself, or your country.
So you spent so much, no.
And that meant you don't rape anybody, you don't murder anybody. Because war is not what people think. There is nothing glamorous. There's nothing rewarding. So I told him, and don't embarrass yourself or your country, and don't relax. And that's exactly what I did, and that's what I believed. Because I have seen things. And I've seen as many atrocities that the Americans did. Many more times atrocities what the Americans did than what any Viet Cong ever did. Yes?
So you spent so much time with these men and they all wanted to stay with you because how did you feel about them? Did you feel protective and how are your relationships with them?
That's a good question. I never felt protective. I felt they were in the same boat that I was in. That has occurred to me. I didn't take any responsibility for them, and I would tell them that. You're on your own. We'd sleep 3 hours on, 3 hours off, or 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 4 hours off, 3 guys. So no, I didn't do that. Though, when I came back in Vietnam, I remember telling my wife that it was difficult to come back because there were people there that did not have the experience that many of us had, and they needed all the help they could get. That's how I felt.
So you mentioned coming back. How did it feel to come back? How did you get back into society?
There's a term called ETS, enlistment, termination of service, something like that. I ETS February 4th, 1969, and I haven't done it yet. I think about it every day. When we went up to the cabin, I did it here. If you spent the night at a birthday party here, I didn't sleep. And everybody knows, my family knows, I count heads of all the kids that are here, the girls.